Good morning, everyone. I'm joined this morning by Mike Barnes, Superintendent of the Mayfield City Schools, a suburb of southeastern Cleveland, or I should say a suburb located southeast of Cleveland. And Mike, so happy to have you here this morning for a conversation. We first met many years ago when the Ed Leader 21 Network was doing a site visit to Mayfield. And at that time, your district was doing really innovative, amazing work, implementing your Porch of a Graduate and really challenging some of the traditional structures of schooling. And I'd love just to start if you would just tell us, give everyone a brief update of the Mayfield journey and what's new.
Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you and spend some time to talk about our Mayfield journey. Our journey really began and it stemmed from a desire to create a shared vision. And I believe that a superintendent, the greatest gift that a superintendent can give his or her community is a shared vision. You bring people together and to create this shared vision for all children, I think is a gift. And also it stimulates a journey for building relationships, trust, and collaboration. And so we started that by just simply asking a question. And that question basically was, what do our students need in order to be successful in a complex and ever-changing world? And we took all of those responses and the result of that was our portrait of a graduate. So our vision for 21st century learning was born from that interaction with our stakeholders. But we knew that vision alone wasn't enough, that we had to travel on this journey to make learning more personalized, to reimagine our learning spaces, to look at how we were grading a little bit differently. We shifted to competency-based learning that I'll talk about a little bit more later, and implement innovative scheduling and grading to better meet the needs of our students. And I will tell you, one of the things at the heart of our portrait is personalization. And for example, at our high school, where we get hundreds and hundreds of visitors a year, we've been able to create, by giving students voice and choice, learning pathways that best meet the way in which they prefer to experience learning. I take my two daughters, for example. My youngest daughter, Maya, is very structured and rigid and doesn't like ambiguity. We often kid her and say, Maya, hey, you have to learn how to be more spontaneous. And she goes, I will if you let me know ahead of time. And then my oldest daughter, Michaela, who's more carefree and doesn't like structure. And when I think about my two daughters raised in the same house, but yet different needs, we want to create systems that can meet kids where they are, so that both of those young ladies, based on their personalities and the way they like to experience life, can thrive. And I think we've been able to capture that here in Mayfield, but it all started with the desire for a shared vision, bringing stakeholders together and not stopping with just a vision.
Mike, one of the things when I visited your district and had the opportunity to meet with a lot of your young people, what was not surprising, but was just so beautiful to me was how empowered the young people in your district felt, whether it was whether it was the middle school students I talked to, I visited the secondary schools, or the high school students, just this sense of agency and autonomy. And, I would love if you just kind of talk to us a little bit about, like, how did that come to be? Because I think that really is that holy grail that we are all looking for, is young people that are self-motivated and taking ownership of their own learning.
Well, yeah, thank you for that. And thank you for recognizing that. I have a superintendent student advisory council, and in asking them, what is it about your learning that you would wish you could have more control over? And they said, we want voice over how we experience learning. And so even during the process of discovering our vision, we brought students to the table and we asked them. And so they feel a sense of ownership over what's happening in the Mayfield City Schools. So they can easily talk to their experiences as learners because they're seen as a part of the journey and not outside of the journey. And so that has empowered our students. And I appreciate you recognizing that. They really enjoyed speaking with you all and spending time and sharing with you all their learning experiences here at Mayfield.
Mike, it reminds me that we just finished some work with the Maine Department of Education, and we interviewed a ton of citizens all around Maine. And there was a superintendent who posed just this beautiful question. And I apologize if he's watching this, his name escapes me right now. But he said, what if we just trusted the young people to tell us what they wanted their educational experience to be?
Yeah.
And I thought, man, that was just a really beautiful framing, right? To just what the journey that we're all on within the Ed Leader 21 network and the districts that we support at Battelle for Kids. And Mike, one of the things, as we visited your district, there was so many wonderful things going on, and you had elevated your portrait of a graduate in just a really powerful way. Your young people had tons of agencies. They were very self-directed. The staff felt an incredible amount of pride and ownership for the work you guys were doing. And what I really loved about it, and as all of us who have sat in the superintendent seat for a long time, sometimes it's hard for folks to understand the leadership, courage, and sacrifices that went into building the coalitions to make that system possible. But your teachers really talked about you a lot and what you had done for them. And it was, once again, it was just a really inspirational time talking to your teachers. But that leads me to this question. You've been superintendent for a long time now. You've recently wrote a book called A Modern Superintendent, A Guide to Institutional Leadership. And thinking about what I heard from your teachers just made me want to ask you, like, what motivated you to write this book, and what would you like to share with everyone that's going to watch us today?
Well, wow, thank you for acknowledging that. Writing that book, writing a book has been a lifelong goal of mine. But I was moved to the topic of the modern superintendent as an instructional leader, because I think often our conversations as superintendents are around budgets, operations, community engagement. And while all of that is important, we have to set the standard around learning and the importance that can be associated with with learning. When it comes from the superintendent, it resonates throughout the organization. I'll take my own journey, for example. I was a child that struggled with reading and writing. We didn't have books in the house with the exception of an old family Bible. My father could barely write his name. My mom dropped out of high school in the 10th grade to give birth to my oldest brother. And so I lacked the foundation and the skills necessary to be a competent, proficient reader. And when I think about the role of the superintendent, and I think about all the children that we lead, approximately 9 out of 10 of kids attend our public schools, the superintendent has to set the tone as the instructional leader and ensure that a little Mike Barnes out there is capable and competent in the foundational areas like numeracy and literacy. And so that was really another part of the motivation to write this book, is to send the message to our colleagues that superintendent as instructional leader is very, very critical to the success of schools and the communities that they serve.
So, Mike, in that vein, I'm interested in, out of all the districts around the country that are implementing the portrait and a competency-based model and really reimagining schooling and the relationship between the teacher and the student, I would love for you to elevate two things for me. Like, one thing is, like, what is something that you did in your implementation journey that moved the needle to a significant degree that surprised you? And then what was something that you thought was going to move the needle that turned in to be just an epic failure? And what did you learn from that?
Wow, great question. I think empowering teachers early on, they became early adopters and ambassadors for this work. Because they were included at the very beginning, they saw the connection between the knowledge and skill and the content and how they both merge to lead to deeper learning. That discovery was not something that was told to them. That discovery was organic as a part of the process. And that was powerful and critical in being an engine that ignited our movement forward. And so I really think that was an important ingredient. At the heart of our portrait is personalization. And one of the things that we tried to do was implement competency-based learning. And we did so, and we moved too fast. We didn't build the capacity of our educators, our educational leaders, and our students and families to be able to understand what that would mean for Mayfield. And so we really tripped over ourselves, and we had to back up and reevaluate things. We've always saw time and learning as a collision, and we wanted to eliminate time and learning. Mike, you may be able to demonstrate an understanding of a concept faster than me. And if it takes me longer, well, it just takes me longer. We're not determining or evaluating my ability to discover and understand. We're measuring that versus time, and that's unfair. So we've been chasing that collision, and we thought the competency-based would be the way to do it, and still do, but we move way too fast, and that was an epic fail on our part. But here's what we say in Mayfield: we start with yes, and we figure the other stuff out. And if it works, great, keep doing it. If it doesn't work, great, let's shift back up and do something else. So we saw this as an opportunity to learn, to grow professionally, because we do believe this is where this personalization journey is taking us, competency-based learning.
And, Mike, it's just so awesome to hear you say that, because it's really interesting, because it really demonstrates this shift in mindset from teachers as being compliant, following a set of rules, following a set of guidelines, to teachers as designers who have the mindset to take some risk in service of creating more personalized learning for their young people, where they take ownership. And I think there's a through line there that you're elevating. I think it's really important to pull out is one of the things that we're seeing in the state of North Carolina is a really great example, is that they started with teacher practice as a way to start to push back on the systems. And so they were creating opportunities for teachers to build capacities around their portrait competencies and developing really strong performance tasks, and then letting that learning from the field begin to push back against the systems.
Wow.
And so we're really seeing that kind of as a through line. And I think, and when I visited your district and all the conversations we've had over the years, you've been such a good friend and just so generous with your experience and your knowledge. And I've learned so much from you, is just that idea that let's give teachers space to innovate and space to follow their heart and follow their craft and follow their art. And let's see where it takes us, and letting that bubble up. Because, I always believe that adage that whatever is imposed is opposed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I could really tell when I was in your district that there was no opposition to what you guys were trying to do, because the teachers were partnering with you to figure out what it needed to look like. And I think that's just a point that I just really want to make sure we pull out with our listeners. Mike, please.
I'm sorry. I love, what you said about the work that's happening in North Carolina, because to me, that is action research at its finest. We can read, we can develop theories, but action research. And is, I think, where the rubber meets the road. And we have to give our educators permission to take risks. We ask our students to take risks all the time and to trust. And I think we have to do the same thing for our teachers. And when we can do that, they feel empowered and they take those risks. And what we discover on the other end of that risk sometimes is good, sometimes not so good. But nevertheless, it moves the needle forward with respect to our quest to improve student outcomes.
So, Mike, for district leaders that may watch this, listen to this, and be feeling that they're compelled to start this journey, like what advice would you give?
Wow, that's great. And I love talking about this. I'll go back to something I said earlier. There's no greater gift that a superintendent can give his or her community than a shared vision. And if you see this work as the opportunity to bring stakeholders together for the purpose of creating a shared vision, you're on a journey towards something special. And I think that that's where the opportunity is for anyone who's watching or listening to this, because it empowers people. It sets a clear direction for the organization. And it's not Mike Barnes's vision. It's not Mike Duncan's vision. It's our vision. And then you have the collective capacity of everyone pulling that horse in the same direction, where those arrows begin to align in the same direction. Now you have clarity and purpose. Watch out.
Mike, there was something that we were talking about before we came on the air, and you were sharing with us that you had a tax levy this year, which we know, we're kind of in a very fiscally very conservative time in the world right now, and and we all understand why. And you had a very successful levy that is somewhat kind of not the norm right now, and it just makes me feel like the work that you did to build the vision and to build a coalition around student learning became the impetus to get the funding to implement that vision. And I was just, and I just really want to applaud your community members and your team for partnering with the community in a way that they say, hey, we believe in this and we see the outcomes for young people. And so, you know what, we're going to step in and we're going to resource this district in a way that we can keep this thing going. And I would love for you just to, take a minute and talk to us about that. I mean, you have to be really excited. You have to feel great about that right now. And, I think we always should be lifting up leaders that, in these times where we have challenges that are having success. And so I'd love just to give you a moment to talk about that.
Thank you. Anytime I get to talk about this great community, I'll take it. There's a saying that we support that which we help create. And because of that shared vision, there's an investment to be made in the Mayfield City Schools in the future of the students who are walking our hallways. And our community realizes that because they've been a part of this journey of discovering this shared vision. And they want to see it through, even though it may hurt, at the purse, in the pocket, the wallet, even though it may hurt, they believe in the investment because they helped create the shared vision. And I think that's so critical. And I also caution us as leaders to be careful to go on a journey alone to create a vision that's not aligned with your community. That's a collision waiting to happen. But boy, when you bring them on the onset and they are a part of the creation of that, then they hold you accountable and you hold them accountable. And then it becomes more about an investment than a financial burden. And I think our community saw that very, very clearly. I mean, my goodness, we won every single precinct.
That's crazy.
And that's in the midst of a county reappraisal where property values saw increases 20, 25, 30% in value. And they still came out and they pulled the ballot for the Mayfield City Schools. So we're very, very grateful and we'll continue to, reach across and welcome them as being a part of this journey for students.
Yeah, Mike, and you elevate such an important point around this idea of coalition building. And a good friend of the network, Donnie Tran, who works for the Center for Innovation Education, wrote a book called The Open System. Highly recommend it. And one of the things he talks about in the book, and he is a great thought partner on, is just this concept of building deep and broad coalitions in your community and being sure that you reach out and have conversations with everyone in your community in a way that is just radically inclusive to hear from all the many different subgroups and all the different cliques in your community to really understand what their perception of the education system is, what their perception of public education is, and ultimately just trying to understand what they want for their young people and using that to engage a more modern strategic planning process where we really think in terms of strategy and not just activities. And so just wanted to give Dr. Tran a shout out there because I think that's such important work that he's doing around this concept of the open system of co-creating schools with your community and trusting them to lean into what's in the best interest of young people. And we have experienced in many districts that we have gone into that may be very politically polarized, is that when we strip that away and people get into a place of co-creation, they often let some of those political talking points go in service of what's best for young people and what's best for the community and what's best for the future. And so it's really beautiful. So I really appreciate you saying that, Mike, and giving me the opportunity to share some of the great thought leadership that's going on in the country. One of the things I would love to get your input on is, there's just a ton of noise out there right now, right? And there's a lot of noise in the ecosystem. And how do you keep your team focused?
Wow, that's a great question, and it's very challenging. I think one of the ways that we try to do that is by remaining laser focused on children and keeping children and the conversations that we're having as a school community centered on children, their outcomes, their experiences. And then I think we do that, by really, focusing on three things, clarity, outcomes, and then telling our story. Mm-hmm. And, with clarity, that is, here's where we're going, so that there's no question inside the organization, outside the organization, where we're going. And I'm going to quickly move to telling our story. You mentioned a little bit about those deep coalitions. The misinformation around public education, I think, has to be one of those things that we address as superintendent leaders across our nation. And I think we do that through those deep coalitions by going out and sharing the stories of successes about our students and about our staff and the amazing work that is happening in our schools. And through those coalitions, we are able to really elevate the truth versus the abundance of misinformation that is actually, happening out there. And so that's the way in which we try to maintain some kind of control of all of the noise. We bring it right back to students' outcomes, and then we try to tell our story. In our most recent community satisfaction survey, when we asked our community about our communication efforts, and it's two-way, that scored very high for us. And that's something that we work very hard at, is making sure that we're telling our story with clarity and focus, and kind of drowning out the outside noise.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me. I think sometimes in education, we love to run to the facts and we love to run to the data, and that doesn't change minds. It's so interesting and it sounds so counterintuitive, but facts rarely change people's minds. Stories change people's hearts.
That's right.
And when the heart changes, the mind changes.
Amen.
And so, man, I've been a fan of your story and your storytelling ability and your team and how you guys do that for a long time. And I'm just so grateful. I remember last year you came into our complex systems cohort, which are some of the largest districts in America that are grappling with the challenges of spreading and scaling deeper learning and portrait learning throughout their district. And you came in and a heavy dose of that conversation was around telling your story, taking back the narrative and changing the hearts, then the minds of the people in the community. And so, Mike, I'm going to ask you to put your future glasses on and tell us, from your seat, from your perspective, what where do you see public education in the next 5 to 7 years?
That's a great question. For me, I see public education in the next 5 to 7 years, becoming more personalized, meeting every student where they are. I gave the example of my two daughters. I see it becoming more connected to the real world, where we build public-private partnerships so that the classroom becomes an actual business where kids can have access to real-world experience versus just reading about it in theory. So this is a more hands-on, and I think more focus on the whole child as well. I think we knew this prior to the pandemic, but more so after the pandemic. Children need beyond academics. They need support in social emotional learning and mental health supports. So I see the whole child as a part of that as well. So I think those three areas: more personalized, more real world experiences that really is elevating workforce development, and a focus on the whole child. I think that's where we're trending, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. And I tell you just two quick personal stories for me. My wife is a work-based learning coordinator for a large suburban school district here outside of Atlanta, and this year she has tripled the number of students who have applied for work-based learning. Wow. And so we are seeing this connection grow between what's happening at our high schools and the need for workforce learning, the need to get young people into the workforce environment to begin developing those durable skills. And the other piece I would share is the Hope and Wellbeing Lab at Battelle for Kids that we built out last year, because we were hearing from so many of districts in our network about the issue of student well-being and mental health. And so just doubling down on this idea of hope and resilience and how we build structures inside of schools that are characterized by instilling young people with hope. How do we help them set goals, determine pathways, develop agency for the future, but also developing resiliency day to day because of the ownership they have in their own learning and the safe to fail mindsets that we give young people. And so I just want to share those two personal stories that I've experienced just in the past couple days because we are getting a significant interest in the Hope and Wellbeing Lab and just this idea of how do we get, especially high school students, how do we get them as soon as we can out into the workplace so they can start experiencing what that might be. And so I think you elevated just some really incredible points there, Mike. I appreciate that. So Mike, as we close, I would just offer an opportunity for anything that you might want to share with our Ed Leader 21 network members and all of our friends around the country that follow Battelle for Kids. Anything that you would like to share?
I just like to thank everyone for the work that they're doing. Our kids are approximately 30% of our population, yet 100% of our future, and they're worth it. They're worth the investment. And I think the opportunity to show up every day for children is noble and it's honorable. And I just like to thank everyone for their fight for children every single day. And the last thing that I would offer is a little bit of self-care. When you're flying on an airplane and before you actually take off, the flight attendants, they tell all of us, in the event that the cabin loses pressure, put your oxygen mask on first. And that is intended to signal that you need to be strong in order for you to help someone else. And my father used to say this: make sure you fill your cup, because if your cup's empty, you can't pour into anyone else's glass. And so I will also challenge us all to make sure we're taking time to take care of ourselves spiritually, emotionally, physically, so that we can get up every day and keep fighting for children.
Advocate, leader, superintendent, author. Remind all of our friends watching this, A Modern Superintendent by Mike Barnes. You can get it on Amazon. Please check it out. Man, you have been such a good friend to me personally for such a long time. I love you. I appreciate you. And man, you're just an inspiration. So thanks for joining me today. Thanks for letting us have this conversation, man. I appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate you as well, man. And, you know, you've been and I know you don't like me to say this, but a leader that I've looked up to. And I've certainly admired the work that you've done, and admire your continued support of the work for young people. So love you too, bro. Appreciate you.
But hey, man, let's keep ramping it up.
Yes, sir.